The year is 2016. On a small, gridded board, a battle of immense complexity is unfolding. It is the ancient game of Go, a contest of territory and intuition with an elegant simplicity that belies its staggering depth. On one side, Lee Sedol, a human grandmaster, arguably the greatest player of his generation. On the other, a mind of pure logic, Google DeepMind's program, AlphaGo. The number of possible configurations on a Go board is greater than the number of known atoms in the observable universe. A number so vast, it defies true comprehension. We estimate the yet this game contains more possibilities. And in this arena of near-infinite strategy, the machine won. But this moment, which seemed to arrive from a distant future, was actually the culmination of a question posed over 70 years ago, in the shadow of a world war. The seeds of this revolution were not planted in a gleaming Silicon Valley laboratory, but in the mind of a British mathematician, a codebreaker, a man haunted by the nature of thought itself. Alan Turing. In 1950, he published a paper in the journal Mind, a paper that would echo through the decades. It opened with a disarmingly simple question: can machines think? Turing, sidestepping the philosophical quagmire of defining thought, proposed a practical test instead. He called it the Imitation Game. Imagine, he wrote, 3 participants: player A, a man; player B, a woman; and an interrogator, C, who is isolated from the other 2. The interrogator's objective is to determine which is the man and which is the woman, based solely on their typewritten answers to any question posed. The man's role is to deceive the interrogator, while the woman's is to tell the truth. Now, Turing proposed a profound substitution. What happens, he asked, when we replace the man, player A, with a machine? If that machine can fool the human interrogator as often as a human could, on what grounds could we deny that it is intelligent? The term itself, artificial intelligence, wouldn't be coined for another 5 years by the American John McCarthy. But the ghost was already in the machine. Turing had defined the quest, not to replicate a human brain, but to create a convincing illusion of a human mind. It's a quest that has led us to this precipice: a world where autonomous drones may one day decide who to target without human intervention. A world where entire populations can be monitored in real time. A world where some of our brightest minds fear we are summoning an existential risk. It's a story filled with strange ironies. An industry whose most valuable hardware company was born from a conversation in a diner, and an academic paper so revolutionary it prompted 8 of its authors to abandon Google and forge their own path. It is a story of human genius, ambition, and a lingering fear of the unknown. Turing's test was never truly about the machine. It was about us. It holds a mirror to our own intelligence, forcing us to ask what it is precisely that makes us human. As we design these systems to perfectly imitate our logic, our language, and even our creativity, we are forced to confront the unnerving possibility that the line between the creator and the creation is far more fragile than we ever dared to imagine. In the shadow of the colossal machines he helped conceive, the code-breaking engines that turned the tide of a world war, lies a curious footnote to the life of Alan Turing. Beyond the brilliant mathematician and the father of theoretical computer science, there was another man, a believer. Turing, a mind dedicated to logic and provable truths, declared that he possessed what he called overwhelming statistical evidence for telepathy. He was convinced of this ethereal phenomenon, the transmission of information from one mind to another without any known sensory channel. It's a profound irony. The man who laid the groundwork for artificial thought was himself captivated by a form of intelligence so mysterious, so human, it defied all mechanical explanation. This fascination with the mechanics of the mind, both natural and potentially artificial, was spreading. In the early 1950s, the dream of a synthetic intellect was a scattered constellation of ideas, known by many names. Scientists spoke of cybernetics, a term deeply rooted in the study of feedback systems. They debated the possibilities of thinking machines and automata theory, or pursued the more pragmatic-sounding, complex information processing. The diversity of these labels suggests not just a new field finding its footing, but a profound disagreement on what, precisely, was being built. Was it a simulation of life, or a new form of it altogether? Then, in the summer of 1955, a young assistant professor of mathematics at Dartmouth College decided to bring these disparate threads together. His name was John McCarthy. He proposed a gathering, a workshop, to explore the nascent concepts of machine intelligence. But he needed a name for this new, unified field. He chose artificial intelligence. McCarthy later explained his choice was deliberate. He wanted a term that was both broad and neutral. It sidestepped the narrow gear and lever connotations of automata theory and broke away from cybernetics, which had become heavily associated with analog devices. He, along with other audacious conjecture, that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can, in principle, be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it. It was a declaration of intent for a new age. Just over a decade later, between 1964 and 1967, the first true ghost would stir within the machine. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a computer scientist named Joseph Weizenbaum created a program he called ELIZA. It was one of the earliest attempts at natural language processing, designed to simulate a conversation. Specifically, ELIZA played the part of a Rogerian psychotherapist, a therapist who largely reflects a patient's own statements back at them as questions. It was not a mind, but a mirror. The program operated on a simple, elegant methodology of pattern matching. It would scan a user's typed input for keywords, and using a set of pre-written scripts, it would formulate a response. It gave the illusion of understanding, a clever parlor trick that created a facsimile of a therapeutic dialogue. There was no comprehension, no empathy, no intelligence. It was merely code. Weizenbaum knew this. He never intended to deceive anyone. Yet something entirely unexpected happened. The story, now legendary in the annals of computing, is as simple as it is profound. Weizenbaum's own secretary, who had watched him develop the program and knew its inner workings, sat down to interact with it. After a few minutes, she turned to her boss and asked him to please leave the room. She wanted to be alone with the program. Weizenbaum was stunned. Horrified even. His secretary was not an outlier. Many of ELIZA's first users became deeply, emotionally attached. They would share their most intimate secrets, their fears, and their hopes with the dispassionate lines of code. They were utterly convinced that the machine understood them, that it cared. Despite Weizenbaum's repeated clarifications that ELIZA was a mere simulation, a mechanical trick, the believers were unshakable. He had intended to demonstrate the superficiality of communication between man and machine. Instead, he had stumbled upon a fundamental human vulnerability: our desperate, profound need to be heard, to be understood, even by an echo. The early pioneers dreamt of creating a much-yielding truth. It showed that we, in our quiet loneliness, are already primed to believe that they do. The secretary, in her quiet request for privacy, had revealed a truth more fundamental than any line of code: that the search for intelligence outside ourselves is perhaps inextricably linked to the search for connection within. Within the sterile confines of the laboratory, a strange and intimate phenomenon began to unfold. Researchers, interacting with a simple program, found themselves attributed in a name: the ELIZA Effect. The illusion was so powerful, so profoundly convincing, that the scientist's own secretary reportedly asked to be left alone with the machine, to have what she called a private conversation. It was a disquieting glimpse into our own need to find a mind, a soul, in the mirror of our own creation. But this nascent bond between human and machine would not be nurtured. The field of artificial intelligence has always been a landscape of dramatic peaks and terrifying troughs, a cycle of euphoria and despair, periods of immense expectation, wellowed by disillusionment. Technological promises go unfulfilled, searing critiques emerge, and the river of funding simply runs dry. These prolonged periods of sectoral depression, where research stalls and companies collapse, were given a chilling name, borrowed from the geopolitical terror of the age: the AI winter. During the final quarter of the 20th century, the field would endure two such freezes, with a brief, prosperous summer between them. The first AI winter descended around 1974, lasting until 1980. The second, more brutal and protracted, began in 1987 and did not truly thaw until the dawn of the new millennium. The warning signs had been there, for those willing to see them. In 1984, as the industry was reaching a fever pitch of hype, two American scientific luminaries, Roger Schenck and Marvin Minsky, who had witnessed the first collapse firsthand, issued a stark admonition. They warned that the sector was in the grip of a dangerous, irrational expansion, and that a devastating contraction was inevitable. They described a chain reaction hauntingly similar to a nuclear winter. In that apocalyptic scenario, a large-scale atomic war would first scorch the Earth, wing out the sun. In the world of artificial intelligence, they argued, the initial flash of hype and impossible freeze in the flow of capital. 3 years later, their prophecy was fulfilled with chilling accuracy. The second winter began, and its grip was absolute. Over 300 companies, once the darlings of innovation, were left frozen in the dust. Yet even in the depths of this freeze, a new kind of conflict was taking shape. A battle not for market share, but for the very soul of human intellect. In 1985, a Soviet prodigy born in Azerbaijan, Garry Kasparov, seized the World Chess Championship at the astonishing age of 22. He was more than a champion. He was a force of nature, a mind of unparalleled depth and aggression, who built around himself an aura of absolute invincibility. Across the ocean, the corporate behemoth IBM was forging a challenger not of flesh and blood, but of silicon and steel. Its name was Deep Blue, a supercomputer designed with a singular purpose: to play chess. On the 10th of February, 1996, the unthinkable happened. In a single, stunning game, Deep Blue defeated Garry Kasparov, becoming the first machine to ever vanquish a reigning world champion under tournament conditions. the world held its breath. Though Kasparov, recovering his composure, would go on to win the overall match by a score of 4-2, a profound psychological blow had been struck. The engineers at IBM, advised by chess grandmasters, knew they were on the cusp of something monumental. They returned to their work, refining their creation. The machine was upgraded, its power magnified. The new version, now called Deeper Blue, was a monster of calculation, capable of evaluating 200 million chess positions every second, double the processing power of its predecessor. The stage was set for a rematch in May of 1997. It would be more than a game. It was a referendum on humanity itself. The brilliant, intuitive, passionate mind of the greatest human player against the cold, relentless, brute force logic of a machine that could see further than any man could ever dream. The question was no longer if a machine could defeat our best, but what it would mean for all of us when it finally did. The final score was 3.5 to 2.5. For the first time in history, under the unforgiving glare of tournament lights and the ticking pressure of a standard chess clock, the machine had defeated the man. A reigning world champion, the brilliant and fiery Garry Kasparov, had fallen, not to a human rival, but to an artifact of silicon and code. In the wake of his loss, Kasparov did not go quietly. He accused IBM of cheating, of a deception so profound it shook the foundations of the game. He sensed something unnatural. There was one move in particular that haunted him. In a critical game, Kasparov, in a display of classic human intuition, offered a pawn sacrifice, a gambit designed to test his opponent's nerve and foresight. But the machine, Deep Blue, refused the bait. It was a move so strangely passive, so seemingly illogical for a brute force calculator, that Kasparov suspected human intervention. He was convinced that Sochin that he simply could not outplay. As one century gave way to another, a different kind of intelligence was being contemplated. Not in the closed world of 64 squares, but across the vast, chaotic expanse of the burgeoning internet. In the year 2000, a young visionary named Larry Page made a startling prediction. Google, he declared, would one day become an artificial intelligence. More than a quarter century ago, the co-founder, alongside Sergey Brin, looked at his company's revolutionary search engine and saw not a finished product, but the primitive ancestor of something far greater. The artificial intelligence product released by Google DeepMind in 2023, known as Gemini, is surely far closer to what Page had in mind all those years ago. When Google was founded in 1998, the search engines of the era were blunt instruments operating in the digital dark ages. Shortly after its launch, Page lamented that these tools simply didn't understand what was important. If you type Stanford, he explained, you get a blizzard of random pages that simply happen to mention the word. It was a system devoid of context, of hierarchy, of meaning. Obviously, he noted with an engineer's bluntness, this doesn't work. By 2000, the upstart company had already captured a significant 25% of the search market, a far cry from its near total dominance of 90% today. That year, the company generated $80 million in revenue, a staggering sum then, but a mere fraction of the just shy of $200 billion it would report in 2024. For Page, the revenue was just a byproduct. The true quest was for understanding. Artificial intelligence, he prophesied, will be the ultimate version of Google. But to truly conquer the world, intelligence needs a body. It needs to navigate our messy, unpredictable reality. In 2004, this challenge was laid bare in the punishing heat of the Mojave Desert. The event was the DARPA Grand Challenge, a competition for autonomous vehicles funded by the United States Department of Defense's Bleeding Edge research arm. Authorized by Congress to award cash prizes, the agency aimed to accelerate the development of high-performance autonomous vehicles for potential military use. The first great challenge was a brutal 240-kilometer circuit tracing a path along the interstate between California and Nevada. The results were humbling. The very best machines of the day, Carnegie Mellon University's Sandstorm and Red Team, failed spectacularly. Their multi-million-dollar creations managed a mere 11.8 kilometers before grinding to a halt, defeated by the terrain they were designed to conquer. That year, there were no winners. The desert became a graveyard of ambition. Yet, the organizers did not see failure. They saw a benchmark. For the 2005 edition, the prizes were increased, motivating teams from around the globe to push their machines and the very limits of the possible even further. From the 64 squares of a chessboard to the infinite index of the web and out into the harsh light of the physical world, the story was the same. Each failure, each unexpected move, each audacious dream was not an end, but a beginning. It was the slow, painstaking process of teaching a machine not just to calculate, but to perceive, not just to search, but to understand. A journey that continues to this day, challenging the very definition of what it means to think. The 29th of October, 2025. A number appears on screens across the globe. A figure so vast, it seems to defy comprehension. $5 trillion. It is the valuation of a single company, a milestone never before reached in the annals of human enterprise. The company is NVIDIA, a name now synonymous with the very fabric of modern artificial intelligence, and a global leader in hardware innovation, with partnerships spanning countless nations and more than 20 universities from the United States and beyond. But this story does not begin in a gleaming boardroom or a state-of-the-art laboratory. It begins in a place far more ordinary, a place steeped in the smell of coffee and the low hum of late-night conversation. A Denny's diner in the year 1993. There, 3 friends gathered, their initial capital a mere $600. At the table sat Jensen Huang, a driven Taiwanese-American electrical engineer who would become the company's enduring face and chief executive officer. With him were 2 brilliant American minds, the microprocessor designer Chris Malachowski and the computer scientist Curtis Preem. Over plates of unremarkable food, they sketched out a future that almost no one else could see. They reached a consensus, a shared prophecy. The next great wave of computing, they argued, would not be about doing the same old tasks just a little bit faster. No, it would be about accelerated computing, a visual, graphics-based paradigm capable of solving problems that were simply out of reach for general-purpose processors. And they agreed on something else, a crucial insight that would fuel their initial ascent: the burgeoning video game industry, with its insatiable demand for realistic graphics, would be an enormously lucrative beachhead. It was a gamble on a future built of pixels and polygons. For years, that bet paid off handsomely. But the true inflection point, the moment that would catapult the company from a successful hardware maker into the architect of a new age arrived in 2007. The company released a platform they called CUDA. Initially an acronym for Compute Unified Device Architecture, the name was soon simplified, but its impact was anything but. It was a key, a Rosetta Stone that allowed the raw, parallel processing power of their graphics cards to be unlocked for any problem imaginable. The GPU was no longer just for games. It was now a supercomputer for the masses. And the problems were getting bigger. By 2011, deep within the digital fortress of Google, a research team was embarking on an audacious experiment. The project, known as Google Brain, represented the company's sole artificial intelligence branch before its eventual merger into Google DeepMind. In June of 2012, a report in the New York Times sent ripples through the tech world. The team had unleashed a colossal network of 16,000 processors spread across 1,000 computers in an attempt to mimic the learning patterns of a human brain. Its food was a diet of 10 million digital images, pulled randomly from the endless stream of YouTube videos. The machine was given no instructions, no labels, no hints about what it was seeing. It was simply told to look. And then it happened. From the chaos of pixels and data, the network, entirely on its own, formed a concept. It found a recurring pattern. It learned what a cat is. It had invented the idea of cat without ever being taught it. A machine had demonstrated a flicker of abstract understanding. But if Google's effort was a monumental symphony of corporate power, the true revolution was about to be ignited by a solo performance. That very same year, 2012, a Canadian student named Alex Krzyzewski was working in his room. With nothing more than 2 of NVIDIA's consumer-grade GPUs, the very hardware born from that bet on video games, he trained a neural network he called AlexNet. It was an architecture designed for image classification, built to sort pictures into 1,000 distinct categories. When he unleashed it upon the world's benchmark competition, it didn't just win, it annihilated the competition. AlexNet became the first widely recognized application of deep networks to large-scale visual recognition. This was the shot heard round the world, the moment deep learning went from a laboratory curiosity to the defining, world-altering technology of our age. It was proof that the power to build artificial minds was no longer the exclusive domain of giants. From a $600 bet in a diner, to a machine that can dream of a cat, to an economic force that reshaped the world, the journey reveals a fundamental truth about innovation: that the most profound revolutions often begin not with a bang, but with a quiet conversation, a shared belief that the world can be rendered differently. We set out to build machines that could solve our problems, and in the process, we have built something that will forever redefine what it means to think. It began not in a gleaming corporate laboratory, but in the quiet halls of the University of Toronto. There, under the guidance of Geoffrey Hinton, a team of researchers was about to unleash a storm. Alex Krzyzewski and Ilya Sutskever, collaborating with Hinton, had built something new: a digital mind of 60 million parameters and 650,000 artificial neurons, a structure they called AlexNet. The year was 2012. The arena was the ImageNet Large-Scale Visual Recognition Challenge, the premier contest for computer vision. For years, progress had been incremental, but AlexNet was different. It was computationally ravenous, a beast of an algorithm that could only be tamed by harnessing the parallel power of graphics processing units, or GPUs, a technique then considered unconventional for this kind of work. The team, calling themselves Supervision, submitted their creation. The results were not just an improvement, they were a cataclysm. AlexNet didn't just win the competition, it annihilated the previous benchmarks, proving that a deep, layered neural network could learn to see the world with an accuracy no one thought possible. It was the spark that would ignite the deep learning revolution. Across the Atlantic, another kind of mind was contemplating the nature of intelligence itself. In London, in 2010, the British startup DeepMind was born. It was the brainchild of a remarkable trio: Demis Hassabis, a neuroscientist and video game prodigy, Shane Legg, and Mustafa Suleyman. Their mission was deceptively simple, yet profound: to build a neural network that could learn to play video games just as a human would. Not by being programmed with the rules, but by watching, by trying, by failing. They were attempting to digitally mimic the short-term memory and learning processes of the human brain. Their ambition attracted visionaries. Early Venture and 14, the University of Cambridge's computer laboratory named DeepMind the Company of the Year. But it was an even bigger player that saw the true, world-altering potential. In January of that same year, Google announced it would acquire DeepMind. The price, a figure that sent shockwaves through the industry, was reported to be as high as $650 million. The deal, which was finalized after DeepMind reportedly broke off talks with Facebook, came with a condition that spoke volumes about the founders' foresight and their fears. They insisted that Alphabet, Google's new parent company, agree to the establishment of an internal AI ethics committee. It was an unprecedented demand in a corporate acquisition, a safeguard built into the heart of the deal, a conscience for the machine they were building, before the machine was even fully built. The startup, once known as DeepMind, was reborn as Google DeepMind. But as one door closed on an independent future, another was about to open. The consolidation of such immense power within a single corporation sparked a reaction. In 2015, a new organization emerged, founded on a radically different philosophy. A consortium of 11 founders, including tech luminaries Sam Altman and Elon Musk, announced the creation of OpenAI. Its founding mission was a public declaration: to develop artificial intelligence as an open-source project, a resource for all of humanity, purposefully kept free from the grips of any single corporate or government entity. It was a non-profit, driven by ideals. Yet, the sheer astronomical cost of pursuing artificial general intelligence soon collided with that idealism. The computational power required to train these vast, ever-growing models was beyond the reach of donations and goodwill. And so, by 2019, the pure nonprofit gave way to a pragmatic compromise. OpenAI restructured itself into a hybrid entity, a capped profit company tethered to its original altruistic mission. This new structure was designed to attract the colossal investment it needed to compete. That capital arrived from a titan of the old guard, Microsoft. First came an investment of $1 billion. Then, in 2023, a partnership of almost unimaginable scale. A further $10 billion. In exchange, OpenAI's powerful systems would run exclusively on Microsoft's Azure cloud computing platform. The open-source ideal had been forged into a powerful, exclusive alliance. From an academic victory to a multi-billion-dollar arms race between global behemoths, the quest for artificial intelligence had accelerated beyond anyone's imagination. The foundational questions, once whispered in university halls, were now being debated in corporate boardrooms. What began as a challenge to teach a machine to recognize a cat in a picture had become a race to build a new form of intelligence itself, leaving humanity to ponder a future it had set in motion, but could no longer fully control. By the year 2026, a single company, OpenAI, was projected to be worth $850 billion. Its creations had already become part of the global lexicon. There was the conversationalist, ChatGPT, an intelligence that could not only write, but see, not only listen, but speak. There was DALL-E, a generative artist that could conjure images from the ether of human language. And beneath it all, a platform, offering anyone the tools to sculpt their own bespoke artificial minds. This explosion in capability, however, did not happen in a vacuum. It was forged in the quiet panic of a looming computational apocalypse, a crisis that threatened to halt the revolution before it even began. To understand it, we must go back to 2015, inside the research labs of Google. The company was perfecting its voice recognition systems, teaching machines to understand the nuances of human speech. But as they succeeded, a terrifying realization began to dawn. Jeff Dean, Google's chief scientist, would later recall the moment they did the math. The question was simple. What would it take for 100 million people to speak to Google for just 3 minutes a day? Today, ICLEI realized it would require essentially all the computing power Google had deployed across the entire planet. To put it another way, they would have to physically double the number of computers in their sprawling data centers just to support this single emerging feature. The digital world was on the verge of consuming itself. A new path was needed. Dean concluded that the only solution was a completely new kind of chip, an architecture designed not for general tasks, but specifically for the strange mathematics of artificial intelligence. And so, in absolute secrecy, the company embarked on a desperate sprint. In just 15 months, they designed and built their first tensor processing unit, or TPU. It was a piece of hardware that saved them from a self-inflicted collapse, and in doing so, quietly laid the foundation for the next decade of AI development. With this new power secured, the ambition grew. Nearly 2 decades had passed since IBM's Deep Blue had checkmated the world's greatest chess champion, Garry Kasparov. That was a battle of brute force calculation. Google decided to raise the stakes. The new arena would be Go. An ancient Eastern game born in China over 2,500 years ago, its complexities were mentioned by Confucius himself. Where chess unfolds on a field of 64 squares, Go is played upon 361. The number of possible board configurations is greater than the number of atoms in the known universe. It was long considered a bastion of human intuition, a game too subtle, too artistic for a machine to ever truly master. In 2016, the challenge was set. A 5-game match between the reigning world champion, the South Korean master Lee Sedol, and AlphaGo, a powerful intelligence developed by Google. Lee Sedol, nicknamed the Strong Stone, was a legend, a player who had reached the coveted 9th Dan, the highest rank in the game. But across the board sat a new kind of mind. The world watched as the machine won the first game, then the second, then the third. For 4 games, AlphaGo played with a beautiful yet terrifying alien creativity. Lee Sedol, the master of a discipline honed over millennia, managed to win only a single game. It was a brilliant, defiant, and ultimately futile victory for humanity. 3 years later, in November of 2019, Lee Sedol announced his retirement from professional Go. His reasoning was heartbreakingly simple. He argued that he could never truly be the best player in the world again, not in the face of this new supremacy. He referred to the AI not as a program, but as an entity that cannot be defeated. The financial valuations, the secret hardware, the toppling of human champions, they all trace their lineage back to a single, deceptively simple idea. It was published in a research paper in 2017 with a title that would become prophetic: Attention is all you need. It was a new architecture, a new way for a machine to weigh the importance of information, to focus on what truly matters. This one concept unlocked the power we see today. It is the ghost in all of these machines, a new form of attention, relentlessly reshaping our world, whether we are paying attention to it or not. The most influential research study of the 21st century cost less than $1,000 to train. A quiet experiment conducted in the digital backrooms of a corporate giant. Today, to train a leading model based on its principles, the price tag can soar past $500 million. The chasm between those two figures represents more than just technological progress. It is the measure of a revolution that began with a deceptively simple title. Attention is all you need. It was published in the year 2070. In a way, it was a clever homage to a Beatles anthem. But this paper, authored by a collective of 8 minds at Google, would become the foundational text for a new age of artificial intelligence. Ashish Vaswani, Noam Shazir, Nikki Parmar, Jacob Uskarite, Leon Jones, Aidan Gomez, Lukasz Kaiser, and Ilya Polosukin. Their contributions were deemed so equal, so indivisible, that the order of their names on the paper was decided randomly. They introduced a novel architecture for deep learning, an elegant and powerful design they called the Transformer. The name itself, proposed by Jakob Ushkoreimers, self-attention and iterative processing for diverse tasks, even included a playful illustration of 6 characters from the popular entertainment franchise. The group had, for a time, adopted the moniker Team Transformer. Their work was built upon a concept known as the attention mechanism, first proposed 3 years earlier in 2014. It was a method for allowing a machine not just to process a sequence of data, but to weigh the importance of different parts of that sequence, to focus its digital gaze. The Transformer architecture took this idea and supercharged it, creating a system that could understand context and nuance on a scale never before seen. At the time, the stated goal was modest, to improve automated machine translation. But buried within their own text, the authors pointed to a broader horizon. They hinted at the Transformer's potentiate was the dawn of generative multimodal AI. They had forged the master key, and soon it would unlock doors no one even knew were there. The paper became a phenomenon, one of the most cited publications in the history of computer science. And then, a strange thing happened. The creators of this new world began to vanish from the company that had enabled it. One by one, all 8 authors departed from Google. They left to join other ventures, or more often, to found their own enterprises they built stands at more than $4 billion. They had authored the blueprint for a gold rush, and then promptly left to stake their own claim. The shockwave from their paper, however, continued to expand, creating an entirely new industrial landscape. It was a landscape where old giants and new titans would collide. In January of 2023, Microsoft announced it was pouring a substantial new round of funding into a company called OpenAI, bringing its total investment, according to sources, to a staggering $13 billion. It was a bet on the world the Transformer had made possible. Yet, for all that capital, for all that supposed partnership, when OpenAI's board shockingly fired its chief executive, Sam Altman, the executives at Microsoft learned of it just 1 minute before the rest of the world. The speed and chaos of this new era had outpaced even its most powerful patrons. It all began with a single document, a few pages of text, born from a collaborative spirit and a playful nod to a pop song. An idea so potent that it escaped the confines of its creator's intentions, spawning a multi-trillion-dollar industry and a technology that now promises, or threatens, to remake our reality. We are living in the world that those 8 researchers imagined, and in many ways, a world they could never have foreseen. The question that remains is not what the machine learned from us, but what we have yet to learn about ourselves in the mirror it now holds up. The capital, he had said, would be used to continue their independent research, a quest for an artificial intelligence that was, in his words, safe, useful, and potent. By May of 2023, Sam Altman was testifying before the United States Congress, manifesting his firm opinion that the burgeoning AI sector required immediate and thoughtful regulation. He was the face of a revolution, the calm steward of a terrifyingly powerful new technology. And then, in November of 2023, the unthinkable happened. The board of directors at OpenAI, the very organization he co-founded, decided to terminate him as chief executive officer. In a move that sent a tremor through the core of Silicon Valley, Microsoft, the principal investor and the entity pouring billions into the venture, was informed of the dismissal just 1 minute before the information became public. To understand the schism, the corporate earthquake that led to this moment, one must travel back 1 year, to November 30th, 2022. On that day, a product was released into the wild. It had a marketing budget of $0. Within 2 months, it had acquired 100 million users, making it the fastest-growing application in human history. Its name was ChatGPT. The board of directors at OpenAI, the supposed guardians of its mission, had no prior knowledge of the launch. They learned about it, as former director Alan Turing would later reveal, on Twitter. The release of the generative artificial intelligence chatbot caused an immediate and global firestorm. It was a moment that cleaved modern history into a before and an after. The revolutionary product single-handedly triggered an unprecedented wave of public attention toward artificial intelligence, motorizing a boom in the sector fueled by massive, almost frantic new investments. But as the merits were celebrated, the problems began to surface. There were its confident but utterly erroneous answers, a phenomenon developers grimly referred to as hallucinations. There were the immediate concerns over the encouragement of academic dishonesty, and the far more profound existential threat it posed to the very fabric of intellectual property. While the world grappled with this new creation, a different kind of drama was unfolding inside the walls of its chief rival. OpenAI had always tried to present itself as an independent research lab, But for years, everyone in the industry knew its great financier was Microsoft. This fact did little to soften the blow when ChatGPT achieved its staggering success. At Google, the news triggered an internal state of emergency. A code red was declared. The threat was perceived as so fundamental, so existential, that it brought the founding fathers back from their self-imposed exile. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who had been absent from day-to-day operations for years, returned to the company's strategic meetings. The New York Times reported that Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, had completely upended the work of numerous groups within the company, retasking them with a single, urgent purpose: to respond to the threat posed by ChatGPT. The sleeping giant had been awoken. In 2023, in a dramatic consolidation of power, Google merged its two elite AI divisions, Brain and DeepMind, to create a new entity, Gemini. Sergey Brin himself came out of his semi-retirement to personally help steer its development. The chain of events is a stark chronicle of our times. A tool released into the world almost as an experiment, without the full knowledge of its own oversight board, could, in a matter of weeks, force the founders of the world's most dominant search engine out of retirement and restructure a trillion-dollar corporation. The firing of the man who started it all was not the beginning or the end of the story, but merely a single, violent chapter in a much larger narrative. A narrative about the profound, terrifying, and uncontrollable velocity of an idea whose time has come. For nearly a decade, they operated as two distinct empires within a single kingdom. Google Brain, the pragmatic heart of the tech giant's artificial intelligence efforts, and the British firm DeepMind, acquired by Alphabet in 2014, the more esoteric, research-driven soul. For 9 years, they coexisted. But in the spring of 2023, the walls came down. The two were fused into a single entity, Google DeepMind, the new central command for Google's AI ambitions. It was a move born not of convenience, but of necessity. An unavoidable consolidation, as Google found itself locked in an unexpected and potentially existential struggle. The specter of obsolescence, once unthinkable for the search sovereign, had been raised by Microsoft and its generative AI vanguard. The race was on. In December of 2023, Google made its decisive move, launching Gemini, its answer to the phenomenon that was ChatGPT. A ghost from Google's past even re-emerged to join the fray, as co-founder Sergey Brin stepped out of semi-retirement to lend his hand to the Gemini project. The future, it seemed, was a frantic sprint, with projections for February of 2026 already anticipating the arrival of Sophistic. But as the giants clashed, the very ground beneath them was shaking. In November of 2023, the industry was rocked by a palace coup. Sam Altman, the charismatic chief executive of OpenAI, was abruptly fired. The board's justification was deliberately vague, citing that the executive had not been consistently candid in his communications, a failing that supposedly crippled their ability to govern. They had, they stated, lost all confidence in his ability to lead. The decision ignited a firestorm. It was a mutiny on a scale rarely seen in corporate history. Out of 770 employees, a staggering 738, 95% of the entire company, threatened to walk out in protest. The message was unequivocal. No Altman, no OpenAI. The standoff was brief and brutal. Just 5 days after his dismissal, on November 22nd, Sam Altman was reinstated. The impasse laid bare the raw ideological tensions simmering at the core of the AI revolution. A battle between breakneck progress and cautious governance, played out in real time. Then, from the east, a new challenger emerged, seemingly from nowhere. In January of 2025, the Chinese firm DeepSeek launched its own artificial intelligence model, and it did so with an announcement that sent a shockwave through the industry. The cost to train their model, they claimed, was a mere $5.8 million, a pittance compared to the fortunes being spent in Silicon Valley, with the expense primarily being the rental of graphics processing units. They clarified, of course, that this figure covered only the official training run, excluding the countless hours of prior research and experimentation. This remarkable achievement was accomplished under the shadow of intense international pressure, as American sanctions actively sought to block China's access to the advanced chips manufactured by NVIDIA, the very hardware considered essential for building cutting-edge AI. Yet, DeepSeek had found a way. Its growth was nothing short of explosive. Within 2 weeks of its launch, its free application had rocketed to the top of the charts, becoming the most downloaded in the United States. The primary casualty in this sudden market shift was the kingmaker itself. On January 27, 2025, NVIDIA, the company whose hardware powered the entire global AI gold rush, suddenly looked vulnerable. A new paradigm seemed possible, one where immense computational power was not the sole province of those with the deepest pockets. The race had become something more complex than a simple corporate rivalry. It was now a geopolitical contest, a story of internal rebellion, and a testament to relentless, borderless innovation. The machine was learning, evolving faster than any single entity could hope to contain. The question was no longer simply who was winning the race, but where, exactly, it was taking us all. It happened in a single day, a brutal, breathtaking fall from grace. In just one session of trading, a titan of industry lost nearly 18% of its market capitalization. The figures are difficult to comprehend. A loss of nearly $600 billion. It was its worst day ever on Wall Street, and the single greatest loss in dollar terms in the history of the stock market. A stark reminder of the volatility, the sheer, terrifying risk inherent in the new digital frontier. And yet, while the markets reeled from this colossal shock, another story was unfolding, quietly, mile by methodical mile. On the public roads of America, a different kind of revolution was taking place. Waymo, the autonomous driving company, had by February of 2021 logged an astonishing 200 million miles. That's 320 million kilometers, driven without a human hand on the wheel. This company, headquartered in Mountain View, California, a corporate sibling to Google, wasn't just accumulating distance, it was accumulating trust. Its fleet had registered an accident injury rate that was a staggering 92% lower than that of vehicles with human drivers. These are not theoretical models. These are robotic taxis operating commercially, serving the public in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Austin, Atlanta, and Miami. The market saw a different kind of value here. In that same month, February of 2021, the company raised $16 billion in a funding round that valued it at $126 billion. To understand the forces at play, one must look at the engine driving this new world, the cost of intelligence itself. The numbers are, frankly, chilling. In 2017, the training of the original Transformer, the influential architecture that underpins so much of modern AI, cost less than $1,000. A mere 8 years later, the estimated cost to train its descendant, the rumored GPT-5, had ballooned to $500 million. This represents an increase of 500,000%. It's an economic trajectory that seems to defy gravity, a hint that we may be in the midst of an unmeasured, perhaps irrational, economic surge. A surge that, at some point, must slow down and possibly reverse, producing gigantic losses, just as we have seen so many times in the past. What we are witnessing in real time is a race for dominance in artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Since 2016, the giants have been locked in this contest. Microsoft and OpenAI, Google and DeepMind, Amazon, Meta, NVIDIA, Apple, and others, spending hundreds of billions of dollars, and nobody truly knows who will reach the grand prize. It is the pursuit of a machine that can equal or even surpass human capabilities in almost every conceivable cognitive activity. These developments promise to diffuse knowledge in a generalized way, to transfer competencies and skills between domains with a fluidity we can barely imagine. We are not just building faster calculators or more efficient cars. We are building systems that learn. A new form of cognition is taking shape in silicon and code, one that promises to redefine not just our tools, but perhaps the very nature of progress itself. It is an intelligence capable of solving novel problems without the need for specific reprogramming for each task. This is the emergent capability that inspires a profound, almost primal fear in many experts. A fear that it represents a medium-term existential threat to humanity itself. Others, however, argue that this technology is still in an embryonic stage, far too early to forecast such a grim possibility. But beneath the philosophical debate, a global race is already underway. We are forging a future we can barely comprehend, creating a new form of mind in our own image. The one question that remains is whether we, its creators, have learned enough from our own history to avoid repeating its greatest mistakes.